Hi there, my name's Andrew Botcher and this is my pitch for my final major project 2018. In this pitch you will understand my idea in greater detail, I will identify the format and structure my idea will have, you'll be able to understand the different media I will use in this project, I will reveal the research that I will need, and I will cover any equipment that will be needed on the project. So what's the big idea? I want to do an audio documentary exploring the life, work and legacy of Roald Dahl. How that will work is I'm going to explore his entire life from birth to the legacy he left behind. I want it to include interview clips from Dahl, as I think that the points that I make can be backed up by any quotes that Dahl have, or even any interviews, and I think this will help the story progress in a detailed way. I'd like to include interviews from archive staff to give an insight into his work. Again, I think that will give the podcast meaning behind it and it will help tell the story. And if possible, I would like to use these archive collections, which again would help tell the story. So my primary target audience for my project are 14 to 19-year-olds who have a passion for literature and are fans of the Roald Dahl brand and books. Most of my target audience would have read Roald Dahl as a child. So I think this because most people would have read Roald Dahl at school or in their own time, and I think that while you're learning it at school, you get a basic kind of knowledge about what he did and how he wrote, but I think I want to go into a bit more detail about his life and uncover the truths and get some knowledge in there that not many people would know. So my secondary audience are children who are fans of the books and the parents, so they're currently reading Roald Dahl at the moment. I think that this podcast would help them understand a bit more about Roald Dahl. And the tertiary audience will be the residents of Great Missenden and the surrounding areas. So that's where he lived, and I think that if I include those, then it will make it more relevant because it's local interest. So people might go, oh, I want to listen to that podcast because I want to know more about this local author. In terms of format and structure, it will be mainly scripted voiceover, and it will be supported by any clips from interviews. The voiceover will be a storyteller and linking up the clips to tell the story. So I might say, Roald Dahl was a pilot during the war, and he explains his experiences, to which I'll have a clip of him talking about what he did during the war, and I think that will add value to it, that it's his personal experience, and also help tell the story. There will be sound effects in the podcast to give depth. So what I mean by that is if I'm talking about him during the war, I might add in a few sound effects of plane or of gunfire or something like that, just to make it a real life story, make it engaging, make it seem real. And I think that the archive will help uncover some of the hidden stories. So every object has a meaning. So I think that if I focus on some of the objects that inspired some of the books, I think that we can get a quite clear idea on how he wrote, how he made his books, and how they became so popular. And for length, I've given myself 10 minutes. I think that'll be plenty of time to go through his life in detail, include clips, and hopefully it will all work out. So there are 3 sections to this podcast that I'd like to do. The first one is the childhood life. So I want to explore who is Roald Dahl, a backstory. Where did he come from? What are his roots? And I want to sort of study that. What about his family? I want to study that and tell people about that, because there are some things that they may not know, some interesting facts. For example, when he was at school, he wrote all these letters to his mum saying how much he missed them because he was homesick. And he even slept in the same direction as home. So I think that having facts like that would sort of bring it back into reality a bit. I'd like to cover a bit about his school life, where he went to school, what he got up to, what it was like at school, and maybe some of the first influences for his books. So Cadbury taste testing, for example, inspiring the work of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I also think that I would cover some of the big stories that happened while Roald Dahl was at school, for example, the Great Mouse Plot. And I think that the archive may have school letters, his original school letters, so I might be able to get one to look at, to film, but I'll come on to that later. The second section of the podcast will be his adult life. So that'll be him working for Shell, being transferred to Africa. What did he do there? And there's also going to be a big bit about war, because he did so much. I'm going to do lots of research about him during the war, because there was so much going on. There was his first published piece. There was his stuff that he did in Washington, and that's very interesting. I think a lot of people, especially his keen audience, would love to hear some of those very interesting facts. I'm also going to talk about Tales of the Unexpected, why he only wrote a couple of them, and why he switched to children's books. And I think that, again, the archive can help by just looking at the inspirations for the books, the original manuscripts and the drafts that he wrote, what he changed. The last part of the podcast will be his legacy. So that's more about the area that he lived in and how he impacts now. So I'm going to include some of the locations in his books, why they're important. And I'm also going to head down to the Roald Dahl Museum and Story Centre and see what part they play, because they're in charge of the Roald Dahl brand and making sure that the readers are still connecting with Roald Dahl. I'm also going to be talking about like what's in the museum, get some interviews from the staff about how important it is to remember Roald Dahl, keep his legacy going, and also what inspired him at the local area. I'm also going to make a video accompanying this, so I'm going to do 2 in 1. I think that having seen this, I think people will be more interested in going to the museum, finding out a bit more of what it's about. So for the audio, I've been thinking about getting interviews with Roald Dahl Museum experts, as they know a lot. They have a lot of knowledge and a lot of background about him. So what I've been thinking is an interview with Graham Laurie. So Graham Laurie is a former RAF officer, and I'd like to get him on board because there'll be so much information that he'll be able to tell, and I think that because he shares the knowledge and experience that Dahl went through, I think that can work in like personal experiences, sharing those personal experiences, but I think will make it more relevant and add value to it. I've also like to interview the Roald Dahl Museum archive manager Rachel White. She can explain about the collection, what's there, and also I would like to get out some of the collections and explain the backstory behind them. Why did Roald Dahl keep some of these weird objects? Why did Roald Dahl do this? And I think that she'll be the person to have the knowledge and the backstory to know. I would also like to use clips from interviews, so I can source those from YouTube. There must be hundreds online, all about different things, such as going to war, his childhood days. So I think including those would again add value and also make it a bit interesting. Hear from the man himself. I'll also use actuality, so that's standing recording. So if I'm talking about him walking his dogs in the forest every day, I'll go and stand in the forest for 5 minutes, record some audio to use underneath to make it sound a bit more natural. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to turn part of the podcast into a video, and I'm thinking it's going to be 1 to 2 minutes. I'm just going to keep it really simple. There's nothing worse than having a great idea and then have the video take it over. So it's going to be really simple edit and hopefully really simple to make. So basically that's going to be focusing on Great Missenden and the museum, like where he wrote, why he wrote there, what are the inspirations, what the locations, that sort of thing. It was also here that I'd like to get the quick interviews with the visitors and Roald Dahl Museum staff. I think this because they work there, they'll be able to give an insight into what it's like working there, why it was set up, why it's so important. So I think that'd be a really key thing to get. And the video can be used anywhere. It can be used on the museum social media. It can be used on my social media. It can be used on the museum website as well. But I'm not sure where I'm going to market it just yet. I'm going to focus on that in my market research. So for research, for my research requirements, I need to focus on the life story of Roald Dahl, his early writing and inspiration, and I can find both of those on the Roald Dahl website, roalddahl.com. I think that having a lot of this research would kind of pave the way for making this podcast really good and really effective. I also want to look at how popular he is across the world. How many languages has his books been published in? His war activities, as I said, he did so much during the war. I think it's going to take quite a lot of digging to find out some really interesting facts, but hopefully I'll be able to find that. The inspiration stories, I think, so like the stories behind the stories, how did they come about? And finally, just general museum research, what the museum's there for, what is there, who it's targeted to, that sort of thing. Finally, some of the equipment that I'll be needing: a Zoom, H2N and accessory kit. I think I would use that for getting the interviews. It's my personal recorder, so I have access to it all the time, so I don't have to book it out, so it's there when I need it. Adobe Audition and Adobe Premiere Pro, the 2 editing software that I'm going to be using. I do know how to use these, and they are on every school computer, so I will know how to use it, so I will know how to use it, but I have to make sure that I book out any rooms or any laptops so I can work on it. I'll also need a Canon DSLR, a camera, a tripod, a Road Leap microphone. These are the 3 main bits of equipment, so I will need to do book it out well in advance and complete risk assessments and show my travel plans to prove that I'm documenting health and safety. I need access to ICT equipment, but there's loads of computers in the school, so that shouldn't be an issue. And finally, I'll need the radio studio for recording voiceovers. I just need to book it before I get... So I need the radio studio to record the voiceovers, so I just need to make sure I book it before using it. So I have access to everything on here, so there shouldn't be any problems with not having to get access. There shouldn't be any problems with not being able to get access. So thank you very much for listening to Roald Dahl, The Life, The Work, The Legacy Pitch. If you have any questions at all, you can email me. My email I'll put down below.